Hello lads and ladies, Brad the Guitarologist here. In this video we're going to take a look at a little corner of guitar history I almost guarantee you've never seen before. It's easy to put up videos of the big well-known guitar makers and get lots of views on YouTube. But on this channel I usually prefer to shine my flashlight in dark corners and unfrequented alleys rather than under the already well-lit marquee. I mean, is there really much point in another video on the history of Fender, Martin, or Gibson? Instead, we're going to look at a tiny guitar company that was in business for only a few short years around 1900. They probably didn't build more than a couple hundred instruments altogether, but their innovations in stringed instrument design are well worth noting. What follows is a story of tragedy, but it's also a story with a personal connection to yours truly. So here it is, the forgotten history of Nightingale guitars and mandolins. Although the history of the six-string guitar is a storied one, with many branches and truncated experiments along the way, it is not a particularly long story in the grand scheme, especially not when compared to other stringed instruments such as the violin, which has maintained its same basic design since the 1600s. An offshoot of the lute, which originated in ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, and the oud from Arabia, the guitar began developing in Europe beginning in the Renaissance era, when French, Spanish, and German luthiers began building lutes with more comfortable, narrow-waisted bodies and four-string courses. By the Baroque era, the courses had increased to 5, and by the 1790s, the guitar had gained its single course of 6 strings we know today. But only since about 1850 has the 6-string acoustic guitar come to resemble something of the size, if not quite loudness, of modern acoustic guitars. Even still, most guitars remain small-bodied instruments, not much larger than those of the Renaissance through about 1900. And it wasn't until then that steel core strings, an American invention, began to supplant wound gut strings as the most popular string choice. This meant the guitars of the 19th century were quiet instruments more suited to the intimacy of Victorian parlors than concert halls. The story of the guitar luthier's pursuit of loudness and tonal complexity is a story often told alongside that of Antonio de Torres of Spain, whose large-bodied instruments and fan bracing patterns jump-started the pursuit of volume around 1850. Although in truth, this pursuit had been going on for at least 100 years prior. In the early 1830s, Christian Frederick Martin, a German luthier who had immigrated to the United States after learning his craft in the instrument-building mecca of Martineukirchen, Germany, began building guitars in his adopted homeland. He began building in New York starting in 1833 and later moved to Pennsylvania, where he continued to build guitars less influenced by his German roots and more influenced by those coming out of Spain. Although Martin was not the most prolific guitar builder of the 19th century, his company adopted many advances in guitar construction which would later become standards, such as the belly bridge, the X bracing pattern, and later the dreadnought-sized body, which we still know today. His company is often credited in large part with helping create the flat-top acoustic guitar as we know it today. However, there was one guitar innovator of the late 19th century whose legacy has remained shrouded in obscurity. One who saw a need for a louder guitar and put his pen to paper, designing an improved instrument that, if widely adopted, could have changed the entire history of guitar building forever. Isaiah Nightingale was not exactly what one would call a household name in guitar history. Born in 1836, he appears to have spent much of his working life in the burgeoning Ohio River settlement of Evansville, Indiana, showing up in city directories as a stonecutter and a foreman at the Henry H. Uhlhorn Stone Works from 1866 until the time of his death at age 58. A career stonemason might seem like an odd candidate for a musical instrument patent holder, Nevertheless, on October the 7th, 1892, Nightingale filed a U.S. patent application for a guitar improvement that seems just as titillating and novel today as it must have seemed in his own time. Described as an attachment for guitars, mandolins, zithers, and other stringed instruments, this new and useful improvement was described in the patent, which reads, "To all whom it may concern, be it known that I, Isaiah Nightingale of Evansville in the county of Vanderburgh and state of Indiana, have invented a certain new and useful improvement in attachments for guitars, mandolins, zither, etc. Within the body of the instrument is a supplemental soundboard, extending from end to end and from side to side of the interior of the body, and secured at a point intermediate between the bottom of the case and the soundboard. Number 3 represents a tube secured on the upper side of the supplemental soundboard and preferably immediately beneath the strings and openings in the soundboard of the instrument. The soundboard and tube may be constructed of wood, metal, or any other suitable material and may, if desired, be arranged in any other suitable shape or form. An attachment made in accordance with my invention, besides strengthening the instrument, adds very materially to the quality of the music, making the tone much stronger and sweeter. I claim as my invention, in a guitar, mandolin, or other stringed musical instrument, a supplemental soundboard with a tube thereon, substantially as for the purpose set forth." Isaiah Nightingale. Nightingale's patent was granted on March 28, 1893. He would die the following year of pneumonia. His brother Charles, a luthier and salesman for a local music store, Harding and Miller Music Company, would later secure a design patent for a mandolin pickguard in the shape of a lyre. His patent was granted in 1900, and the Nightingale Guitar and Mandolin Company was born. In 1902, it was relocated, possibly due to a fire in its Main Street building, and by 1904 was no longer listed in the city directory. So it would seem that one brother's dreams of improving the guitar by adding a second soundboard were cut short by his untimely death, so his brother Charles, inspired by his memory and imagination, created the Nightingale Company guitar in his memory. Although the company was short-lived, the few extant instruments that remain tantalize us with questions of what might have been. Today, double-top guitars are considered cutting-edge. Luthiers are experimenting with sandwiching multiple tops with layers of a honeycomb-like material called Nomex in between. These guitars are said to produce a louder, more complex tone than traditional guitars. But this was an idea first dreamed up in 1892 by a stonemason in a bustling river town on the banks of the Ohio. And the Harding and Miller Music Company, where Charles Nightingale worked as a luthier and salesman, they would later move into a building on the 500 block of Evansville's Main Street. In 1973, it would become ABC Music Center. Around 1978, it would be bought by a man named Pat Moore and renamed Moore's ABC Music, and later simply Moore Music. From 2008 to 2010, I was the manager of Moore Music. What a small world. Now let's travel down to Evansville to take a look at one of the few remaining Nightingale guitars known to exist up close and personal. The one we're going to look at resides on permanent display in Goldman's Pawn Shop, an establishment that has itself been an ongoing family business in this exact Evansville location for over 100 years. I have not lived in Evansville for many years now, but every time I go back, I usually make it a point to stop into Goldman's and see what instruments are on the wall. The owner, Bob Goldman, was not in this day, but his daughters were good enough to help me examine the Nightingale guitar. Unfortunately, there was a technical malfunction with the camera I brought with me, so I had to resort to using my cell phone to capture these images. It's not ideal, but we'll have to make do with what we have. The guitar was not playable in its current condition, so a sound test will not be possible. However, a friend of mine named Art Woodward, who still lives in Evansville, and who also supplied me with a few of the images used in this documentary, owns 2 examples. So maybe one day we can hook up with him and see if the inventor's claims are true. Do you know if there was a serial number or anything on these anywhere?
Not that I know of.
Where did you guys get this one?
No telling. I mean, we've been here since 1898. I'm
Yeah.
not sure.
I didn't know whether it was something that Bob had inherited or if he
I'm
bought
sure.
it. Or
I'm sure he in here.
Interesting. Was this always a pawn shop?
Yeah.
For that long?
Yeah.
All right, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this short history of Nightingale guitars. If you have, please hit subscribe down below. I want to say thanks to Goldman's Pawn Shop for allowing me to come in and get some film footage inside of their store. They were really gracious folks. If you're ever down in Evansville, definitely check out Goldman's Pawn Shop. You never know what you're going to find in there. I've often found some really cool old curious instruments in their shop. The owner is a real kind of history buff, and he keeps nice, cool old things around a lot. So definitely worth checking out if you're ever down there. So anyway, that'll do it for this video. And for now, y'all take care.